everyone, and welcome back here to another lesson video. Today we'll be reading this poem titled A Legend of the Northland. So a legend means an old story of the Northland. So Northland here can be referred to a country that which is near the northern pole. Okay, so suppose we have our globe here. This is southern pole, this is northern pole, so the country is near it. You can imagine of any country there. Now when you hear the word Northland, what image or what images come in your mind? Well, in mine, Santa Claus's image appears, and then he's traveling in his sleigh with reindeers and bringing gifts to children on Christmas. So that's what I picturize. Now this poem is a story, a legend of an old lady who angered Saint Peter because of her greed. So we will see that an old lady who provoked Saint Peter, who made Saint Peter angry, all because of her greed, all because of her stingy nature. Okay, look game like ki ani Saint Peter la keu thaba ra lama Peter lama la ani lungla khai se na morangi tengam che tha che ra ni ta pha lungla inde doji dunga re. So this poem was written by Phoebe Cary, and she was an American poet. She lived during 19th century. So first of all, we'll read the poem and then I'll explain it to you. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the days are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through, where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bears' cubs in their funny furry clothes. So here in the first two stanza, it talks about the area, right? The region of Northland. It says that in Northland, the hours of the day are few, so the days are shorter than the night, and especially during winter, nights are so long that it is difficult for them to sleep all through the night. And they harness swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows. So when it snows, you know reindeers, right? So they tie sledges. Is a thing that carry people or stuff, and it is tied to reindeer. Swift means fast. And the children look like bear's cubs. So when it snows, children looks like bear's cub, as in the picture you see here, in their funny furry clothes, because they wear funny and furry clothes, furry full of covered with furs. Okay, as you know, because it is cold there. So this picture will give you a better understanding of what reindeer and what sledge means. So this is a sledge, and they have tied this harness to the reindeer so that it can pull this sledge. Okay, I hope you get this point. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe it is true, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. Once, when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it preaching just as he did, you know. So there in the region of Northland, they used to tell children a curious story, an interesting story, and the poet doesn't believe it is true, but she says that we may learn a lesson if she tell the short story to us. The story begins here from fourth stanza. Once when the good Saint Peter, so this is our first character, Saint Peter. Saint Peter was an apostle of Christ, lived in the world below. When he lived in this world and walked about it and traveled through the world, preaching means teaching, just as he did, you know. So we know that saint and messengers, they preach, they teaches their doctrines and religion to everyone they come across, right? So he was just doing that. So this is Saint Peter, okay, an animated picture of him. He came to the door of a cottage in traveling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. And being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. So when he was traveling around the earth, he then came to a door of a door of a cottage. The door of a cottage. A cottage, can be understood as a room. So there was a door, and he saw a little woman was there who was making cakes and baking them on hearth. Hearth means fireplace. So the little woman was making cake near them, and being faint with fasting. Faint means weak. So he was weak with fasting. Fasting is a thing where you skip your meals. Khala masache khala nga zoda nyungung khala sagi meals thari nga konda khala sagi meals la jorwa sejing ogoda lagma tene to you do it for a cause. Okay, so he was doing it, and then because he didn't eat properly, he was weak. For the day was almost done, sun was about to set. He asked her from a store of cake. She had store of cakes to give him a single one. So he wanted to have a single one piece there. Now here, this is hurt, and this old lady is cooking something here, but she was baking cakes there. Okay, so you understand what hurt means. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. Therefore, she needed another and still a smaller one, but it looked, when she turned it over, as large as the first had done. So when she was asked to provide one piece of cake to the man, she made a very little cake, okay, and as she put it to bake there, she looked at it and she thought that the cake that she had baked looked too large to just give away for free. Therefore, she needed another. She made another piece of cake, and still a smaller one, but this time a very smaller one compared to the previous one. But it looked, when she turned it over as it was baking, it looked as large as the first had done. Okay, then she took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as a wafer, but she couldn't part with that. For she said, "My cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself are yet too large to give away." So she put them on the shelf. Now what happens is, she then took a tiny scrap, okay, very small amount of dough, and rolled it flat. Then she made that dough and then made it flat and baked it as thin as wafer. So it was made as thin as a wafer, but she couldn't part with that. But she couldn't leave the company of that wafer. She couldn't give it free to the man, right? Saint Peter there, because she said, her cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself. So when she eat that cake by herself, it seemed too small, and yet when it is time to give something away, then it seems too large. So she put the cakes back onto the shelf. Okay, shelf, nana shasarwa, the place where you put the cakes there. So here this is a dough, and the person is kneading the dough, and then this one is wafer. You might have eaten this, and you see the layer of a wafer is very thin, and she baked a cake as thin as a wafer. Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. And he said, "You are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter and fire to keep you warm." Now, because she had been repeating the same thing over and over again, Saint Peter grew angry there. Why? Because he was hungry and faint. He was weak, and he was also hungry because of his fasting there. And surely such woman, such greedy and miser woman, was enough to provoke, was enough to make Saint Peter angry. And then he said, "You are far too selfish." Who is you? The woman. The woman is far too selfish to dwell, to live in a human form, to live as a human, to have both food and shelter and fire to keep warm. So these three are the basic requirement of anyone to live a proper life, right, back in old days. So now Saint Peter is angry. "Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard dry wood." Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. Now see what happened here. he cursed the old lady, Saint Peter, right? He says that now you should live as the birds and get your scanty, means very small amount of food just the birds eat. By boring, means boring here refers to working hard all day in the hard dry wood. So she will work there in the hard dry wood where there is not much food to eat. Then up she went through the chimney. So chimney is the place from where smokes come out. So suppose we have a house here and we have a chimney here, so out of which smokes come. So up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word. From that moment onwards she didn't speak anything, and out of top flew a woodpecker, and out of that top flew a woodpecker. So woodpecker is a bird, for she was changed to a bird, because she was changed into a bird. So this is a woodpecker. You might have seen this bird, it pecked woods, and yeah, you can see the color over the color of the bird here, right? There is a scarlet color over the head, and then rest of it is black. She had a scarlet cap on her head. So the old lady was wearing a red cap, red colored cap on her head, and that was left the same, that was there same, but all the rest of her clothes were burned black as coal in the flame. But when she moved through the chimney, chimney is the place where you burn something, right? When you, so her old clothes turned burned black and as a coal as she went through the flame. And now every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood, okay, where she lives in the tree till this very day, boring and boring for food. So now there every country schoolboy has seen her, the woodpecker, in the wood in forest where she lives in tree till this very day, and boring, working very hard for food. Written by Pete Gary. Okay, I hope you get this point, and think that it had helped you a little while. So the poem that we have read is a ballad. So what's a ballad? It's a song narrating a story. So this is a song, actually a poem which tells us a story in short stanzas. Ballads are a part of folk culture. Folk culture means people culture and popular culture, and are passed on orally from generation to generation. Right? Generation to generation orally lagashna they don't write it not quite often, they pass it on by just singing the song as they narrate the story. So a legend of the Northland is a ballad. Next time if you see a ballad in English language, it simply means a long story narrated in short stanzas, and these are passed on orally from generations to generation. So with that, we are done with this lesson video. I hope all of you have learned something, and thank you.